Brothers and sisters, stop for a moment and hear this. In the dead of night, while the city of Ouagadougou lay in silence, 12 of the nation's most important laws were torn apart and rewritten. Not in 12 months, not in 12 weeks, but in 12 hours. 12 laws in one night. Imagine the speed, the audacity, the sheer will it takes to do that. Most governments argue for years over a single reform, but here, in a single stroke, an entire system was reshaped. And the man behind it, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. 37 years old, a soldier, a visionary, a leader who refuses to wait for permission from Paris, Washington, or anyone else. Last night, he sat down not to dream, but to act, and he rewrote the playbook of a nation. These were not minor adjustments. These were foundations. Who owns the gold? Who commands the army? Who controls the banks? Who educates the children? 12 pillars of power, reset in the span of a single night. This is why the world is trembling this morning. France is asking questions. Washington is watching closely. Africa is whispering. If Traoré can do this, what stops the rest of us? So the question is not just what he changed. The question is why. Why the secrecy? Why the urgency? Why all at once? Stay with me. Because when we open up those 12 laws, you will see not just the rebirth of Burkina Faso, you will see the first cracks in an old empire and the first light of a new Africa. Brothers and sisters, picture the scene. Midnight in Ouagadougou. The air is heavy. The streets empty, and the lamps in the presidential palace burn brighter than ever. Inside, a man of 37 years sits surrounded by files, advisors, and soldiers standing guard at the doors. His hand does not shake. His voice does not waver. The order is clear. Tonight, we change everything. And so it began. One by one, 12 laws that had bound the nation for decades, were taken apart and rewritten, not patched, not amended, rewritten. Each stroke of the pen felt like thunder in the silence of the night. Each law was a blow to the old order, and a promise to the new. The first law struck at the veins of the earth. All gold revenues must now flow through the nation's treasury. No more quiet deals with foreign companies. No more billions vanishing overseas while the people starved. Burkina Faso's gold, from this night forward, belonged to Burkinabe hands. The second law reached deeper. Oil and natural gas contracts were declared void unless renegotiated under national terms. A simple sentence on paper, but a death sentence to corporations who thought they owned the land. The third law turned to the banks. For decades, foreign institutions had whispered into the ears of politicians, holding the country in debt. Now, a decree declared no loan, no interest, no decision would bypass the state. The Central Bank of Burkina Faso would take command of the nation's financial destiny. The fourth law was about the army. Soldiers who had bled in the fight against terror would no longer wait for scraps. Their salaries were raised, their supplies secured, their loyalty bound not by poverty, but by pride. The fifth law spoke to education. Curriculums written in Paris were torn apart. A new program, History from an African Perspective, Languages of the People, Pride in Black Identity, was set in motion. The classroom would no longer be a tool of mental colonization. The sixth law took aim at the press. For years, foreign-funded outlets had dictated the story of Burkina Faso. A new statute demanded transparency in ownership and funding. Those who served outside masters would lose their licenses. The seventh law protected the farmers, the forgotten backbone of the land. Subsidies for seeds, guaranteed prices for harvests, and strict limits on land grabs were written in black and white. The eighth law empowered the women of Burkina Faso. For the first time, a comprehensive protection act against forced marriages and exploitation was passed, giving mothers and daughters the right to stand free. The ninth law cut into the shadows of corruption. Every minister, every official, every general was required to declare assets or face immediate suspension. The 10th law opened the door to Africa itself. Regional trade barriers with Mali and Niger were dismantled, forging the first steps of a Sahel economic corridor. The 11th law was military but symbolic. Foreign bases on Burkina Faso soil would face review within 30 days, a quiet earthquake that sent shivers through embassies overnight. And the 12th law, the most mysterious of all, declared that in 12 months, a referendum would be held to ask the people whether Burkina Faso should join a wider African federation. 12 laws, 12 thunderclaps in the silence of the night. When the sun rose, Ouagadougou was still the same city. The markets opened, the buses ran. But beneath the surface, the very foundations had shifted. A new country had been written into existence while the world slept. And yet, what do 12 laws mean on paper if the forces of the old order rise to resist them? Brothers and sisters, dawn broke over Ouagadougou like any other day. Roosters crowed. Children ran barefoot to school. Women balanced water jugs on their heads. The city looked unchanged, but beneath the dust and sunlight, whispers spread like fire. 12 laws in one night. At first, it was disbelief. In the markets, vendors leaned across their stalls. "Is it true?" one woman asked, her hands still sorting mangoes. "They say the gold is ours now," another replied, her eyes wide with hope. No, it cannot be," a man muttered, shaking his head. "These things don't happen overnight." But then the radios began to confirm it. One station after another announced the decree. The news poured through battered speakers and glowing phone screens. The president had signed 12 sweeping laws. 12 in one night. The people's pulse. For the ordinary people, the reaction was raw. Farmers in the villages smiled when they heard subsidies were coming. Soldiers in the barracks cheered when they learned their salaries would rise. Mothers wept in quiet relief at the law protecting their daughters from forced marriages. Students whispered with excitement about new lessons that finally told Africa's story, not Europe's. And yet, not everyone rejoiced. In upscale cafes, former ministers sat frozen. Lawyers flipped through their old contracts and realized they were worthless. For every poor family celebrating, a wealthy elite felt the ground shift under their feet. The old order strikes back. By mid-morning, the phones of embassy staff in Ouagadougou were buzzing. Paris, Washington, Traoré, and Brussels demanded explanations. How had 12 laws been passed overnight without debate, without approval, without warning? "This is not democracy," some cried. "This is authoritarianism in disguise." In the financial districts of Europe, alarms rang louder. Gold prices trembled. Investors whispered about risk. Corporations that had once drained Burkina Faso's veins of wealth held emergency meetings. Could one man undo decades of contracts overnight? And then came the headlines. Traoré declares economic war on the West. Burkina Faso breaks chains or breaks itself. 12 laws. One strong man. The streets of Ouagadougou. By afternoon, crowds began to form outside the National Assembly. Some waved flags, chanting Traoré's name. "Traoré, Traoré, the land is ours, the future is ours." Others stood quietly, suspicious, waiting. They had seen leaders rise before, only to betray them later. On social media, the debate was fierce. Youth posted videos of themselves tearing up old French textbooks, shouting, "We will write our own history now." Others warned, Do not celebrate too soon. The West will not accept this peacefully. The emotional high point, brothers and sisters. Imagine the electricity of that morning. Hope on one side, fear on the other, mothers blessing their children, generals scanning their phones, journalists rushing to print. The nation's heartbeat raced faster than it had in decades. And through it all, Ibrahim Traoré remained silent. No interviews, no speeches, only a short written declaration. These laws are the foundation of a sovereign Burkina Faso, nothing more, nothing less. The silence spoke louder than words. Was it confidence? Was it defiance? Or was it simply the calm before a storm? The cliffhanger, because while the people celebrated and while the world debated, another truth was already taking shape. Powerful interests, both inside and outside the country, were preparing their response. Those who had lost fortunes overnight would not sit still. Those who had built empires on Burkina Faso soil were sharpening their knives in the dark. Yes, brothers and sisters, the people rejoiced. But even as drums of hope echoed in the streets somewhere else, the drums of resistance began to beat. Brothers and sisters, laws are not just words on paper. They are levers. Pull one and a whole machine shifts. Pull 12 in a single night and the entire system trembles. That is what happened in Burkina Faso. The morning after, the ink was barely dry, but the ripples had already begun. Immediate shock waves. In the gold mines of Houndé and Essakane, foreign managers receive phone calls from headquarters. Freeze operations, review contracts. Nothing moves until we know what these new laws mean. Workers gathered outside, nervous but curious. For the first time, they felt the ground beneath their feet truly belonged to them. At the central bank, officials rushed to implement the new financial rules. Some clerks whispered nervously, worried about retaliation from international lenders. Others smiled quietly. At last, we answer to our own government, not to Paris. In army barracks, soldiers lined up to hear the news, pay raises, new supplies, respect restored. A sergeant stood tall before his men and declared, "The days of being cannon fodder are over. We fight for ourselves now." The cheer that followed could be heard across the base. Short-term gains and fears. Within days, the price of bread in Ouagadougou's markets dipped slightly as subsidies reached farmers. Families who had struggled for months tasted relief. Mothers whispered blessings for the president who had thought of them. But there was fear, too. Shops that imported goods from Europe hesitated to restock. Traders asked, "If the West retaliates, will our shelves go empty?" Hope and dread lived side by side like twins in the same house. The political earthquake. In the corridors of power, the old elite panicked. Ministers who had once signed shady deals scrambled to hide their assets. Businessmen tried to move money abroad, only to find bank transfers blocked. One former official muttered bitterly, "Traoré is not rewriting laws, he is rewriting the future, without us." Meanwhile, across Africa, leaders watched with uneasy fascination. Some praised Traoré for his courage. Others feared their own people would ask, "If Burkina Faso can take back its gold, why not us?" Foreign repercussions. In Paris, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs called an emergency meeting. One advisor whispered, "If we allow this to stand, every colony will follow." Another replied coldly, "Then we must make an example of him." Washington was no calmer. Analysts warned that Burkina Faso might pivot entirely toward Russia or China. Headlines blared, "The Sahel slips away." Investors demanded clarity. Do our contracts mean nothing anymore? The world's financial system thrives on predictability. Traoré had just injected pure chaos. The human faces of change, brothers and sisters. Let us not forget the people. A farmer in Bobo Dioulasso looked at his new seed subsidy and whispered, For once I will not watch my children starve. A miner held his helmet and said, "If the gold belongs to us now, then maybe I won't die in these pits for nothing." A young girl, hearing about the new education law, told her mother, "Mama, I will learn our history, not theirs." These voices are the true measure of 12 laws, not the papers in the palace, not the debates in foreign capitals, but the heartbeat of the people themselves. Long-term storm clouds. But laws, brothers and sisters, are promises that must be defended, and already storm clouds gathered. Corrupt officials plotted in silence. Foreign corporations prepared lawsuits. Western governments whispered of sanctions. Even terrorists in the Sahel saw an opportunity. If the state is distracted, we will strike. Traoré had moved faster than anyone expected. But now came the harder task, holding the line. For what is the use of rewriting laws if the old powers find ways to break them? So the question that hung in the air was simple. Would these 12 laws remain ink on paper, or would they become flesh and blood in the lives of the people? The people celebrated. The world trembled. But the fight, brothers and sisters, was only beginning. Brothers and sisters, the sun had barely risen over Ouagadougou when telephones began to ring in Washington, Paris, Brussels, Moscow, and Beijing. What had happened in Burkina Faso was not just a national event. It was a global shockwave. 12 laws, rewritten in one night, struck at the very foundations of the international order. Washington's dilemma. In Washington, the language was careful, but the fear was clear. Officials called Traoré's move reckless, destabilizing, even dangerous. Think tanks scrambled to draft reports. One headline in the Washington Post screamed, "Burkina Faso slips from Western orbit." Behind closed doors, the truth was plainer. America was worried. If a small, landlocked country could so boldly defy the rules of global finance, what stopped others? If Traoré could void contracts and reroute resources overnight, who else might follow? Some voices in Washington urged sanctions. Others whispered about covert operations. But one senior diplomat admitted to a mob, "The man is popular. If we touch him, we risk making him a legend." France's panic in Paris, the reaction was sharper. France had considered Burkina Faso its backyard for over a century. Now, overnight, Traoré had cut the strings. Contracts, military bases, cultural influence, all suddenly at risk. French newspapers shouted, "Is this the end of France-Afrique?" Television pundits fumed. But in the cafes of Paris, African immigrants smiled quietly, whispering, "At last, someone is standing up to them." Inside the Élysée Palace, advisors debated, could France apply pressure, or had it already lost too much ground? One voice said bitterly, "If we cannot control Burkina Faso, then we cannot control Africa." Russia and China smell opportunity. Meanwhile, in Moscow and Beijing, the mood was different. Analysts studied the new laws and saw an opening. Russia whispered promises of military cooperation. China hinted at infrastructure deals. For them, Traoré's defiance of the West was not a crisis. It was an invitation. Africa watches closely across the continent. Reactions were mixed. In Mali and Niger, governments cheered. "This is the Sahel rising," one minister declared. In Ghana and Senegal, leaders grew nervous. If their people saw Burkina Faso taking back its gold, would they demand the same? But for ordinary Africans, from Lagos to Nairobi, the sentiment was clear. Pride. Social media buzzed with the phrase, "Traoré did in one night what others failed to do in decades." A divided world. So, brothers and sisters, the lines were drawn. To the West, Traoré was a dangerous gambler threatening stability. To Russia and China, he was a partner waiting to be embraced. To Africans, He was either a beacon of hope or a warning of chaos. The world was no longer just watching Burkina Faso. The world was choosing sides. Brothers and sisters, rewriting 12 laws in one night is a thunderclap. But what follows a thunderclap? Silence or a storm? Traoré had shaken the foundations of Burkina Faso and the world beyond. Yet now came the hardest part, turning words into reality. The challenges first, the bureaucracy. Old officials still sat in offices, some loyal, many resentful. A law may declare gold revenues belong to the state, but if clerks and inspectors remain corrupt, will the gold ever reach the treasury? Traoré could not fight this battle alone. He needed an army not just of soldiers, but of honest men and women willing to guard the new order. Second, the economy. Foreign investors threatened to flee. Sanctions whispered on the horizon. Could Burkina Faso survive isolation, or would the dream of sovereignty collapse under financial siege? Traoré's answer seemed clear. We will tighten our belts before we bow our heads. But hunger is a cruel enemy, and the test would be severe. Third, the enemies within. The elite who lost fortunes overnight would not remain silent. Conspiracies brewed in the shadows. Some whispered of coups, others of assassination. Traoré knew. Every law he signed was also a target on his back. The opportunities. Yet, brothers and sisters, challenges are only one side of the coin. On the other side lies opportunity. For the first time in decades, the people of Burkina Faso felt the state was theirs. Farmers believed in subsidies. Miners believed in justice. Students believed in new textbooks that spoke truth. A nation that believes in itself is more powerful than any army. And beyond the borders, the Sahel alliance with Mali and Niger grew stronger. Three nations walking together could forge an economic corridor that no foreign empire could ignore. Some even whispered of a federation, a united Sahel, rising from the desert like a phoenix. The symbolic road. Most of all, Traoré had become a symbol. To the youth of Africa, he was proof that change does not need permission. To the elders, he was a reminder that courage had not died. To the world, he was a question mark. Was he a reckless gambler or the architect of a new order? Symbols can inspire revolutions, but they can also attract storms. So, brothers and sisters, the road ahead is clear only in this. It will not be easy. The laws are written, but the ink is still wet. The enemies are circling, but the people are awake. The West prepares pressure, but Africa prepares hope. The real story begins now. Will these 12 laws stand the test of bullets, bribes, and betrayal? Or will they crumble, leaving only the memory of one bold night? Stay with me, because the answer to that question will not be written in Washington or Paris. It will be written here, in Africa, by the people themselves. Brothers and sisters, let us step back and see the picture whole. In one night, a man of 37 years rewrote 12 laws, 12 chains, 12 cages, 12 walls that had kept his people bound. With the stroke of a pen, Ibrahim Traoré did what most leaders would not dare attempt in 12 years. And yet, this story is not about ink and paper alone. It is about destiny. It is about whether a nation can reclaim its soul after decades of being told it has no voice, no right, no future of its own. The 12 laws are more than legal codes. They are markers, beacons on the road toward sovereignty. They say, the gold is ours, the oil is ours, the schools are ours, the future is ours. And that message once spoken cannot be unsaid. But brothers and sisters, power never leaves quietly. The morning after, the poor danced and the rich trembled. The people cheered and the old order plotted. Washington frowned, Paris panicked, Moscow and Beijing prepared their offers, and all the while Burkina Faso stood at the center of a storm. What comes next? That is the question hanging over us like a drumbeat. Will Traoré's laws be implemented, defended, and lived out by the people? Or will the forces of greed and empire strike back, determined to crush this spark before it spreads across Africa? For make no mistake, the eyes of the continent are watching. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Lagos to Johannesburg, young Africans whisper to each other, "If Burkina Faso can do it, why not us?" That, brothers and sisters, is what makes this moment historic. This is bigger than 12 laws. This is bigger than one man. This is about Africa itself deciding who writes the rules. So let us end where we began, with the image of a night in Ouagadougou, a city asleep, a palace awake, and a leader refusing to wait for tomorrow. 12 laws, one night, a continent holding its breath. Stay with us, because this is only chapter 1. The next pages are still being written by Traoré, by his people, and perhaps by all of Africa. And if you believe this story matters, if you believe the world must hear what is happening here, then subscribe, share, and keep watching. Because, brothers and sisters, history is not finished. History is unfolding, and we are living it together.